Hello and welcome to the Too Much Apparently podcast. If you're new here, this is a podcast for the deeply feeling, overthinking, emotionally overloaded humans who've been told they're too much apparently. And if you're back, thanks for choosing to sit with us again.
We're Alice and Carly, two therapists who are also just sensitive weirdos trying to make sense of life, healing, and our own brains. This isn't a professional advice podcast. It's more like the messy, honest conversations that happen when you finally feel safe enough to say what you're really thinking.
This space is for people like us, the ones who've been called too sensitive, too serious, too emotional, too intense, and have spent way too long believing that it's true.
Okay, on with the episode.
In this episode, we're talking about what it's like to be too nice to say no, those times where you're nodding along, saying yes with a smile, while part of you inside is screaming, please no.
We'll get into why we keep saying yes when we don't mean it, the guilt hangover that follows, and how learning to say no isn't about being selfish. It's about finally being as kind to yourself as you are to others.
Talking about being too nice to say no, what we're essentially talking about is people pleasing. So shall we give a rundown on how we're defining people pleasing?
Yes, I wrote down a little note about this. So people pleasing isn't just being nice, which I think is what people tend to think about when we think about people pleasing. The people that might be described as, oh, they're so nice, they will do anything for anybody. But it's a survival strategy. A lot of us learn it in childhood, especially if love, safety, or approval felt conditional. And when you grow up needing to manage someone else's moods and emotions to avoid conflict, abandonment, or even harm, you learn to fawn, you learn to appease. So you smooth things over, you stay agreeable, you make yourself smaller so you don't risk rejection. Essentially, we don't want to rock the boat. So for sensitive or intense people, it can feel even stronger because we pick up on other people's emotions so quickly that discomfort feels unbearable. So we try to fix it before it happens. If we're someone who can strongly feel the emotions of others and then we feel that for ourselves, of course, we don't want to feel that way. So in order to not, we then end up managing other people's emotions. And then if you add to that the socialization of women under patriarchy, where we're taught to be polite, likable, always with a smile, compliant, self-sacrificing, then people-pleasing becomes almost expected. Underneath, it's usually driven by fear. If I upset you, you'll leave me, stop loving me, think I'm not enough, not important, don't have worth, or decide that I'm too much.
Yeah, that's a really great summary. And I'm wondering how it is for you. What's your relationship like with people pleasing? What have you been able to change as you've recognized people pleasing playing out in your life? And what do you still find tricky?
So for a long, long time, most of my life, I think people pleasing was in my bones. Ever since I was little, I have been a people pleaser. And I think it came from a few different places rather than any one thing. So where it came from in childhood is I was always the good one in terms of between me and my siblings. And my mum has always said I was never any trouble. I was the good baby. I was really happy. If my mum said, don't touch that, Carly, it's too hot, I would definitely not touch it. I'd be quite happy just playing make-believe by myself. And so when my sister came along and she was the don't touch that, it's too hot, and oh, okay, and reaching out to sort of touch it, she was the opposite of me. I don't know if that's common with the second sibling to be more like the wild one. So my sister was definitely the wild one. Yeah, but I was the good one. And so when you get complimented for being good, I think parents are doing that in a nice way. How many times do you hear parents say, oh, you're such a good girl, you're such a good boy? It's so common. But when you hear that again and again, that then becomes part of who you are almost. And then you've got to keep that going. And the way you keep that going is, well, I'm good. People don't get cross with me. People don't get mad with me. So I need to make sure now that continues. So I think part of my people pleasing stemmed from what it means to be the good one. And I also think it came from my experiences with peers at school. I struggled socially, although I got on okay. But I had such a big focus in myself on being included, on fitting in, on being likable, that again, I think I bent myself backwards to fit myself into pleasing everybody else, meeting all of their expectations of me, and doing things that they wanted to do, even if I didn't want to. So if I wanted to play this game, but somebody else wanted to play this game, oh, we're going to play your game then. So when I look back on my life, I think the conditioning for people pleasing started very early and has existed for many years, and over time has morphed into different things and different ways of people pleasing. And because I also have a trauma history, I think then that compounded it further by bringing in fawning and appeasing, which for anyone listening who doesn't know, fawning is a survival strategy, which essentially is about appeasement. And that can look like lots of different things. But when you add that on top of it, you then just have a person who's rife for thinking about everybody else and not necessarily themselves. And so I made myself smaller, I made myself quieter, went along with what everybody else wanted, and tried to meet other people's expectations. But that has changed significantly over the past, how many years would I say? I want to say 5 years. I feel like I keep saying 5 years on this podcast when I reflect back of when things started to change. There's something about 5 years that I keep saying. Nothing magical happened 5 years ago. This maybe just is the story that I'm telling myself.
It was the pandemic, wasn't it? Was there something kind
Oh,
of in the pandemic
yes.
that was a review point for
Yes.
you?
You're so right. This is why I keep coming back to 5 years, because it was. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's why. Thanks for that reminder. That makes sense now. I keep saying 5 years. Yeah, it was. I think it was for so many people. We should talk about that at some point. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
on to this episode. So I've changed that a lot. And I'll talk about that in a bit, but I'm interested to know your history when you think of people pleasing and when you think of yourself when you were younger. Do you have a relationship with people pleasing at all?
Yeah, so it's interesting kind of when you were saying about wondering whether the second child is more the wild child. And actually, I think with me and my sister, it's really a mix. So for me, when I think about people pleasing, it's really not something that I would have identified myself as. And so I've talked before about, this kind of more fight, determined, defiant part of me. So I think that has protected me from it to some extent, because there is part of me that will be like, no, it is this way. And I think because I like being in control, I would have been the one that's like, we're playing this game and we're playing it how I want to play it.
So,
Um,
sorry, just to interject, are you the second sibling?
no, I'm the oldest sibling,
Oh,
but
okay.
I don't think it's actually that straightforward. So I feel like I don't know what my mum would say now, but certainly in the past, I think my mum would have said that my sister was the good one. I was the difficult baby for sure. And yeah, I think she would say that my sister was the good one, but I think I actually was the good one. My sister has done far more things. In fact, there was a very controversial moment when I think my mum was having a go at me about something, and I was like, well, Lisa's got a tattoo.
You dubbed her in.
I dubbed her in. Yeah,
Oh,
I think she's forgiven me. I think she's forgiven me now. Um, I think I had very mixed messages. So one of the things that came to mind for me when I was thinking about this episode and about being a good girl is that rhyme about, girls are sugar and spice and all things nice. And being a good girl was a really kind of strong part of my childhood. I really, remember that messaging. It's important to be a good girl. And I feel like I tried so hard to be a good girl, but I just couldn't seem to get it right. I feel like I was compared to my cousins a lot, and like so I've got one cousin, and I felt like she was definitely the good girl, like the goodest girl, and I could never
the
quite live up
goodest.
to the goodest girl, and I could never quite live up to her levels of good. And now I think I still have a kind of complex relationship with it, that sometimes I can really hold my ground, and other times, even now, I can really get caught up in that fear. You said about like what runs underneath it is a fear of rejection ultimately, that does play a part, that I can be too scared to share my opinions or say how it is. And I know it was really bad at one point because I remember being afraid to disagree with my mom about who was the best singer on the X Factor.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Just a tiny kind of inconsequential thing like that. I
Can I
feel
say
like it,
something there?
yeah.
It's sounding a little bit like the difference between you and I is I feel like my good girlness was more something I was told that I was, and then I wanted to continue to meet that expectation. I never lived with any fear of rejection, like from my mum or anything like that. It was more just being praised for being this. And so this is who I am, and I now want to keep meeting it. Whereas it sounds like what you're saying is there was this expectation of you need to be a good girl, but you were maybe feeling like you were always falling short of it and not quite meeting it.
It's quite mixed, I think. I think the message I got was sometimes I was the goodest girl, sometimes I was the best, the most wonderful, and sometimes I was the worst.
So it was inconsistent.
So it was really inconsistent, and I couldn't really figure out as a child where I was going wrong.
Yeah. I mean, that inconsistency as a child to swing from those two polar opposites must have been so hard and so confusing to know then where you fit in all of that, going from being the best to almost the worst,
Yeah. Yeah.
potentially in the space of a few hours.
Yeah. So it isn't that traditional people pleasing. I suppose when I think about people pleasing, I think more about people that present the way that you do, that really are kind of solidly in that good girl, kind of place. But yeah, there's something really important about what we're praised for, isn't there? And it sounds like actually that's what you were praised for and wanted to do more of it, and also it became your identity. Whereas for me, what led to it was inconsistent, which means it's inconsistent in me, but it is still something that has a big impact on my life.
Yes. Yeah. That's where it gets so tricky as parents because even the nice things that you're saying to a child can end up becoming a thing that impacts how they are in the world. It's just, yeah, it must be so hard. I mean, you have 5 of them, so I don't know.
Mhm. Right. And I think with having 5 children really has taught me that they're all so different. Even where some of them have some similarities, actually they are really different. And parents can't get it right. And I think that's not the point of parenting, I think. I think actually a better goal for parenting, rather than trying to get it right, is how can you apologize and repair when you get things wrong? Whether that's an immediate in the moment or 20 years later when they're coming back to you and saying, actually, this wasn't so helpful for me. How can you deal with the awful feelings that brings up? Because I know that for myself, my older 2 are adults. So when they come back to me and say, look, I didn't like this, or when you do this, it makes me feel like this, it feels horrendous because I want to be a good mom. But yeah, there's something about being able to achieve a good repair. And does the parent take the responsibility for that? I feel like I'm going off topic there into.
Well, I think anytime for anyone, when they start to look at where certain things for them have come from,
Yeah.
inevitably you end up looking back and you end up looking at parents. And then inevitably, and this happens all the time in therapy, is people get flooded with guilt for what they're saying about parents. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that. And as a parent, as you said, you can both hold compassion for doing the best that you could with the knowledge and tools that you had and take responsibility for where, oh, I didn't realize how that could impact you. And actually, I'm going to acknowledge that and apologize for that. And that can be really healing. So, anytime we're talking about these topics, we will inevitably find ourselves taking trips down memory lanes to the past, won't we?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
It sounds like you were saying you don't always identify and relate to the notion of people pleasing, even though you can connect to this experience of being the good girl or needing to be the good girl.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you had this defiant part in you, this defiant, quite confident voice, really, maybe even, I was going to say rebellious, but that is divine. Anyway,
Yeah.
so I'm curious if you had the expectation placed on you that it's important to be good, which essentially means doing what is expected of you from other people. How do you think you dodged the people pleasing part?
I don't know. I wonder if this comes back to kind of nature and nurture. And again, kind of wonder this with my own children, because some of them really do lean more towards people pleasing. And I really have to watch out for them saying yes when maybe they don't want to. Others are, they're going to say no. And they're fine with saying no. And I can't really place what it is that means that some of them are one way and some of them are another. So I think it does come down to nature and nurture. And also, how do we know? Who knows what kind of micro things happened when I was a baby or a toddler that have then kind of started this process, this kind of unconscious process rolling of being quite defiant. As well, to kind of go back to what you were saying about fawning. So I think about fawning as one of the kind of 4 Fs. I think there's probably more than 4, but I think there was the 4 Fs of there's
I think of
5.
the five Fs.
What are the 5 Fs that you know?
Fight, flight, freeze, fawn, flop.
So I saw a family therapist once and she had fart in there.
Fart? What was fart as a trauma survival response?
Well, I think she was talking about the way that your body can react and the way that your gut responds to trauma, and that so in extreme stress you might poo yourself because you need to run. So who knows how many Fs there are.
You might poo yourself because you need to run.
That's what she said. That's what she said. She was great. She was a great therapist. But anyway, kind of let's get back on track.
I
So
love that.
yeah, so fawning being one of the trauma responses, I bounce between fight and fawn. Well, I bounce between all of them, but yeah, there's this kind of tug between, and I think it depends who it is. So around people that I'm more comfortable with, I'm more likely to go to fight. So around my husband, with my sister, I'm thinking about it. Like if something goes, like if I'm staying in a hotel and something goes wrong, like if I've done a little weekend trip with my sister or something, my sister's fine with being like, this was wrong and it needs to be sorted out. Whereas I'll be like, oh, it's fine, no problem, don't worry about it.
That's so interesting because I am the opposite. In my interpersonal relationships, I am more likely, I mean, not so much now, but definitely in the past, appease, fawn, all of the above. But when it comes to those outside experiences like customer service, things like that, that is when I can stand up for myself because that's where it starts to trigger my sense of unfairness and injustice. And that is one area in which that my fight can come up and I can use my voice and stand up for myself. But it's when it comes to interpersonal stuff with people, yeah, it's not there. So I found that kind of interesting that it's the opposite way around for each of us.
Yeah. And I think we're stumbling on something really important about identity here, that sometimes we can pigeonhole ourselves in boxes or out of boxes when actually it's far more complicated and nuanced than, we're both Instagram therapists. We both use Instagram for marketing and post things on there. But it is much more kind of complicated and nuanced than Instagram might make you believe.
Oh, yeah, that's one of those big struggles that I have with Instagram. Just even when I'm trying to use it myself, boiling down really complex themes into very simple, bite sized chunks that then lose all of the nuance. And sometimes I think it's great to make some of those things more accessible. And sometimes I think, is it having the opposite impact where then people are just taking a very complex issue boiled down to this one little snippet at face value?
Yeah, yeah. And also the limitation of identifying with a particular box. So if you see yourself as a people pleaser, then part of the struggle to get out of people pleasing behavior is, what does it mean to you to not be a people pleaser anymore? Because if there are parts of you that see people pleasing as a positive thing, which, to some extent it is, we need to be able to get on with other people to function in society. What's it going to mean for you to give up that label and give up that identity? And so who are you if you're not a people pleaser anymore? And so even being someone who doesn't, I wouldn't kind of put myself fully in that box. There is part of me that kind of hesitates a little bit and is like, oh, what am I then if I'm not a people pleaser, a people unpleaser, or people disappointer?
I think people think, oh, that means I'm mean. That means I'm selfish. That
Yeah.
means I'm
Hmm.
unkind. I think we go straight to the opposite. That must mean that I'm not helpful and I don't care about people and I'm selfish and I'm being horrible. It leads you to being not the good person, straight to the bad person. And so often our brains
Yeah.
look at things in that binary black and white way that if I'm not this, I must be the opposite of this then.
Yeah. And that's a real struggle, isn't it? That kind of, yeah, if I'm not this, then I must be that. And then it becomes terrifying to give it up. And I think it is more of a problem for women. I actually see a lot of it in the men that I've worked with over the years as well. So it's not solely women. But I think it's really important to look at the societal element when we're thinking about these messages, because it's not just what did we get from our parents. Actually, women are told over and over again, we're the carers, we're the nurturers, we look out for other people. This, what it looks like to be nice is to put other people first. And if you are someone who thinks more in these black and white terms, or if you haven't spent a lot of time reflecting on how these messages that society, or the things that you've picked up when you were younger, impact you, then you might not even realize that the unintended negative impact that has on you as well.
Definitely. And also the unintended negative impact that it can have on those around you. I think people pleasing is arguably closely linked with rescuing as
Mhm,
well.
mhm.
And
Which
so,
sounds like
if
another thing, which sounds like another good thing,
a good
right?
thing,
I'm
yeah,
rescuing people. That's a good thing. How can that be bad? Tell us.
I will. So, if we're then someone that finds ourselves when somebody has a problem, we're the first one there trying to solve it, to fix it for them, maybe before they've even asked for help. And we're finding ourselves telling them, right, what you need to do is, right, what you should do is. And we're straight there telling them exactly what it is that they need to do. And often not just telling them what they need to do, but then I'll do that for you. And then taking it over from that person. If we're constantly going out of our way to help other people and taking things from them and doing them so that we're then rescuing them and we're the good one again, we're the really nice one, we're the kind one, all of those things that make us feel really good about ourselves. But then we're also depriving that person from their autonomy, we're depriving that person from being able to figure out solutions to themselves, taking away their independence, disempowering people, and meaning that they're not going to lose, and meaning they're not going to be able to gain the skills that they need to be able to sort those things out for themselves next time. So we keep that person reliant and we do them a disservice ultimately. But we don't know that we're doing that. This is coming from someone who historically was a rescuer, by the way. I haven't been a rescuer in quite some time. It was starting my therapy training actually, where I was suddenly like, oh, I can't be this here. That oh, I'm seeing now that this is a bad thing. So as someone who has done this and been this, we don't realize the impact that then that is having both on us, but also the people that we keep jumping in and rescuing or even forcing our rescuing upon.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah.
But you're right, so much about this comes down to identity and then the things that also make us feel good about ourselves or feel good in the world. So then what do you do when you come across the narrative that says you should stop rescuing, you should stop your people pleasing? Like you said earlier, then that's actually quite scary because who are you then if you're not that? And so when someone just says, oh, you need to put more boundaries in place, you do, you need to start saying no more often. Even if people recognize that for themselves, then actually doing it in practice
Mhm.
takes a whole lot of other work that
Right.
needs to be looked at.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that there needs to be this exploration of what's going on that's prompting these kinds of behaviors. How are they? I was going to say, how are they serving you? Which feels like an odd thing to say because because on the surface, it seems like it makes sense. I suppose it feels like like layers of it. So on the surface, it looks like it makes sense. Then when you look closer, it's a bit like, oh, maybe this isn't as healthy as I thought it was. Maybe this doesn't mean as good things about me as I thought it did. And then having to go another layer under that and looking at, so where is this really coming from? Which, often, like you said at the start, comes back to fear. What are the
Yes.
fears that are driving this behavior?
And I think it will be multiple fears, but also some will be stronger than others. And that's going to be different for each person, what the
Yes.
predominant fears are that's driving that behavior. And that's where I think there's people pleasing on the top and all the ways that what that might look like. But the underneath part that you're talking about, that bottom layer, is going to be different for each person and down to each person to try to understand about themselves in order to work back up the layers, I guess, to start to try to change it.
So we said a little bit about the fear of being then seen as being mean, or feeling like not just seen as it, but that we are mean. I guess there's also something in the black and whiteness here of rescuing isn't always bad. Sometimes it's helpful. Sometimes people need rescuing because they don't have the resources. And we're not saying that helping people in general is bad, that you can still be a helpful person, a reliable person, a dependable person. You can still be all of those things without the unhealthy layer in the middle that's coming from fear.
That's a really important point because we are so easily led into this way of all or nothing thinking. It's possible to still be a nice, kind person who does things for others. That doesn't mean totally sacrificing yourself, because there's a great quote that's anytime you say yes to somebody else, you're saying no to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's such a focus on not being mean to others, when are we stopping to think about, but does that mean I'm being a bit mean to myself? Am I being a bit unkind towards myself here? What about me? Where am I in all of this? And it's just recognizing, oh, I am important too. And so I can do things for me. I can put more boundaries in place. I can say no for people. And when I want to, and I have the capacity to, I can put my needs aside to do this thing for this person because I'm choosing to, rather than I am compelled to because I'm being driven by that underlying fear.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things that comes to mind for me there is I feel like every now and again on social media, I'll see things about therapy speak and about the way people are like, I'm setting these boundaries and that's it. And I just want to catch that I see that actually as an important developmental stage that some people need to go through. That when they have put other people first all of the time, that there can be this kind of pendulum swing to me. I need to focus on me. And that can be uncomfortable for the person and it can be uncomfortable for the people around them. And I think it is a legitimate phase that's not everyone, but that some people go through and that some people I think need to go through that phase. And that the way that I try and deal with that in my practice is trying to present it as not a competition between their needs first or my needs first, but me as well. How do we look at everybody's needs, including mine, and make the fairest decision looking at everybody involved?
Yeah, that's a nice way of looking at it. And I also agree where people need to go through that stage for themselves. And I think I maybe went through that stage. But anytime I've done reading into research and things around when you start to put boundaries in place, often they say when you first put that boundary in place to put a very strong boundary in place first, because it's easier to then peel them back a bit and 10 times harder to put in a bit of a boundary and then try to make it stronger. Whereas if you go in with strong, it's easier to then, actually, I don't think it needs to be as strong as this. I think I can peel it back. And it's easier ultimately doing it that way around.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because I feel like I've seen a lot recently where people are saying about start small, start small. Well, I guess you could do both, can't you? You could start with something small and have a strong boundary.
Yes.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. I think you can find ways to have it to do both.
Yeah.
So we're talking about too nice to say no. And we've spoken quite a bit about this idea of being really kind, really polite, nice. And so when we were talking about doing this episode, we had a bit of a play about different nice characters and the way in which that can present as people pleasing. So we've come up with a few. So do you want to start by telling us what one of them is?
Yeah. So the first one is the yes machine. So this is someone who always agrees before they've even thought about it. Their motto would be, sure, I can do that, and then regret it instantly.
So for that person, it's absolutely just automatic. You've just gone
Yeah.
straight in. You've not,
Mm.
there's been no thinking whatsoever. And it's only afterwards that you're like,
Yeah.
oh, what did I just say yes to?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Then we've got the over explainer. They turn every no into a 10-minute PowerPoint presentation. It's where you get that text from that person and then the stream of justification as to why they have said no. Their motto would be, I can't come because my dog might be sick and also Mercury's in retrograde and da 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 and da 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 and on and on. And on and on. So over explaining, over justifying when you do have to say no.
Yeah. So the next is my personal least favorite, the smiling martyr, which I think is a lot of people, a lot of people. So says yes with a grin, and building that resentment in silence. So their motto would be, it's fine, I'll do it. And then secretly plotting their escape.
Yes. I think it's the tone. You captured the tone there
Mm,
of that sentence
hmm.
perfectly. It's the
Hmm.
tone that comes along with it. Where if we are a chronic people pleaser, if we've done it our whole life, then you will often find whether we like it or not that resentment sits under it, especially because we will have thoughts such as, oh, I do everything for everybody else and nobody does anything for me.
Yeah.
Because when we overgive all the time, there's this expectation that other people should give that back to us. And when they don't, we feel resentful about that.
Yeah. And the reason it's my least favorite is I see it as people pleasing with a whip, and that it's the kind of people that I've been whipped by quite a bit, where I think they're being nice. And then all of a sudden, like, you've got that, all this negative feeling. And I wish they'd just said no in the first place. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I see it as people pleasing, and the whip is guilt.
Mm.
So they'll do the nice thing, and
Yeah.
then there'll be a statement about the fact that they've done it that brings about then guilt in you. So you're then feeling bad that they've done this thing.
Yeah.
So again, it's like, well, you just say no. I'd rather you just said no.
Yeah.
So then we've got the shapeshifter. So adapts to whatever other people want, but hides their real preferences. So their motto, and oh yes, boy do I do this, is I don't mind whatever's easiest for you, whatever you prefer. Like what do you want to do? So
Yeah.
not making choices, not making decisions. I would like to do this. And just totally go, oh, no worries, whatever you want. No worries is a real phrase that will pop up a lot when it
Yeah.
comes to like people pleasing. The, oh, no worries, or don't worry if this is a problem for you, but,
Yeah.
or the
Yeah. And
preamble.
yeah, and I think if this one goes on for long enough, it's not just not voicing preferences, it's also that you can lose connection with what your preferences even are in the first place.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
see that a lot. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And then so the last one um is the guilty ghost, and this is definitely something that I was guilty of when I was younger. Um because I didn't know how to say no. So the guilty goat, the guilty ghost says yes, and then panics, and then cancels at the last second. So their motto would be, "I really wanted to come, but." And yeah, this is something that I've really struggled with, is not wanting to disappoint people, not wanting to let people down. Actually, I think can be a real clash between that really legitimately wanting to go, and then for me in the past, it would have been social anxiety. I guess it could be other things, just not being able to cope with it and feeling ashamed about why I can't really make it. Um, so sometimes you'll get the sorry, I really wanted to come, and kind of that sort of flaky friend. Sometimes it's just complete ghosting.
Yes. The guilty ghost, 100% is
Mm.
me now. but for different reasons. So in the past, guilty goes because I said yes when actually I don't want to do that thing at all. And now I'm immediately thinking of how to get out of it. But I sit with the anxiety for the whole time, right up until it's about to happen, and then would cancel. That's what I used to do. Where I'm at with it now is I rarely say yes to something that I actually don't want to do. Obviously, occasionally it still happens, but it doesn't happen that often anymore. Now it's sometimes where I'll say yes to something because at that moment in time, I genuinely wanted to do that thing. But then as it gets closer with my health struggles, energy struggles, something might have changed that then I decide that actually I no longer can go or want to go. I need to preserve my energy. And so then I can cancel sometimes last minute because I don't know until last minute. Or sometimes I'm thinking, oh, I'm not really sure I want to go to this thing, but part of me does.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, so many people say this, is sometimes you don't feel like going to a thing and you make yourself go and you have a really good time and you're, oh, I'm so glad that I made myself go. And sometimes you make yourself go to a thing and then the whole time, why have I come here? I'm not having a good time. I'm not enjoying myself. I knew I shouldn't have come. And
Mm-hmm.
annoyingly, you don't know what it is till you've gone.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when an event's coming up and you're having a little one part of you is dreading it, but another part of you feels like, oh, but maybe I want to go and I will have a good time. It's so hard to know, but which part do I listen to? Which part is the real one? And maybe that there isn't the real one. You just don't know what it's going to be like till you're there.
Yeah. 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 That there are just competing parts that want different things. And I think also, again, there's something here about that balance between meeting our own needs and meeting other people's needs. Because if you're always meeting your own needs at the expense of social interaction, you're probably going to end up quite isolated. Oh, I heard a great thing recently. It said the cost of convenience is isolation. The cost of community is inconvenience. Oh, that's really annoying that I can't remember exactly how it was. But yeah, it was just that kind of comparison about kind of focusing on yourself and your own needs, which is great, but you might end up more isolated, or focusing on other people's needs where you'll get community out of it, but you're going to have to put up with more irritation and inconvenient things. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I like that. I can definitely understand the sentiment of what it's saying.
Yeah.
That's where sometimes when people first start to put boundaries in place, when you said sometimes people go all in
Mhm.
and they're putting loads of boundaries in place, I think that's then where then people will realize that they start to peel it back because of the isolation that it leads to. And I would say that's part of what happened when I started to put loads of boundaries in place. You suddenly do then start to realize, oh, okay, it's great meeting my needs all the time, but then I do feel a bit more isolated because I am saying no to more things. And like so many things in life, I think it really comes down to balance. That there will be times when you don't really want to do a thing. You say yes and you have a good time, times when you do it when you don't. And there'll be times when you might have a really great time, but you just don't want to go. And that is also okay. I feel like it is an important message that it is okay to cancel. And I know that being a reliable friend and honoring commitments is also important too. It's not that it's okay to cancel all the time and let everybody down. But it is okay to cancel when that is so important and what you need to do for yourself that you can be reliable and you can commit to the next time. But it does have to be okay to cancel. And actually, my friend Vicky and I have an agreement in place because we understand each other's needs and how sometimes things can be difficult when we've made arrangements. So we have an agreement in place where either of us can cancel and it's okay. So then, if she does cancel a bit last minute, or I've cancelled a bit last minute, I don't have any negative feelings towards her when she does because I know I have done and can do the same. And that agreement wouldn't work with every friendship, but it really works for us.
Yeah. It's really lovely when you can have those kinds of agreements with friends. That sort of sounds similar to what we've said in episodes before about when we text after being together, kind of being able to say stuff, and not having to hold it in, not having to perform being a good friend, but just being able to be real with each other and keep in mind what each other's needs are. So that sounds like it's going really well. What might be the signs for you that you need to have a look again at your boundaries where maybe some have slipped a little bit or aren't really working? How would you know that for yourself?
Bit like in the last episode where we were talking about our tiredness levels, fatigue levels. I think one of the signs for myself about checking in with my boundaries is if I'm feeling like I've not had that much time for myself, or I've been doing a lot, particularly if I've been doing a lot socially. So if my tiredness and overwhelm levels start to creep up, one of the first things I'll try to look at is my boundaries around commitments and how have I been spending my time. And sometimes that's because I've been saying yes to lots of nice things, which are all good things, but too much of a good thing can still not be great. That will be one of the things that I look at. But to be honest, I've worked on this so much that I don't think there are that many signs that pop up for me overall now. I think largely it's around energy and commitment management in terms of the things that I'm doing, because I will now say no, I will cancel something when I really just can't. I just can't. I can't go. And I do worry about what people think about me still. So there are still things around it that I can work on, but the actual act I'm still doing, even if it's still bringing up uncomfortable feelings for me. But signs for me in the past would definitely be saying no and then feeling that instant dread and the panic of how am I going to get out of this? And then the long anxiety in the build up to said event where I'll tell myself, but this time I'll go, and I'll inevitably cancel last minute. And it's strange to say that I now say no more often, but I am less flaky because in the past I'd say yes, but then cancel. And it's not nice to be an unreliable or flaky friend. And so saying yes was making me more flaky, whereas now I'm saying no more from the outset and then occasionally saying yes and then having to cancel. So I think I'm more reliable now than I was as the people pleaser saying yes all the time. So dread and panic and overwhelm about said thing and how I'm going to say no. And the other part is definitely, we mentioned it earlier, when you're saying no, providing an over justification. So a long message that follows. That's all the reasons why my no is justified. And that comes from a place of if they can understand why I've said no, then they can't have any negative feelings towards me because they get it. So if I provide enough reasons, they can't have any bad feeling towards me because they'll read my message and think, oh, yes, I understand. That makes sense. And so hence the over justification. So that would be something that I would do a lot. Saying that, I think that I'm still guilty of is sometimes that preamble before a message of it's okay if you say no, but, or oh, no worries if you can't, but. So I'm still guilty of doing those little preamble bits, soft leading into actually it's okay to have needs and to ask for someone to meet those needs. You don't have to apologize for having a need to begin with and say, it's okay if you don't. Like, no, it's not. Like, it's okay to have a need and ask for that need to be met. Why do we have to put no worries or it's okay if you can't? Like, you have a need and you're asking that person to meet it. Just say that. But I still do it. It's that soft lead up into it.
Yeah, I think so. Over explaining is definitely something that I do. And for me, it comes from a place of being quite sensitive to rejection. So imagining that other people also have that. So when I'm saying no, I want to also really clearly get across that either I do want to do it, but I'm not able to, or I really want to spend time with them, but not in this way. Or, I want the other person, even if I'm saying no, I don't want them to hear, I don't want to spend time with you unless I don't want to spend time with them, in which case I won't do the over explaining. But being able to say no and also I do still care about you, but I can hear that there is some anxiety in that, which again is, I guess, is about getting the balance right, and that's going to vary from person to person and situation to situation. I think the biggest thing for me, and I think it's less around commitments because I think like you, I'm a lot better at saying no straight up because I just don't want the anxiety of having to later say no if I don't want to go. I've definitely kind of learned my lesson on that. Um, the way it shows up more for me is around being authentic. So the people pleasing shows up a lot for me in feeling like I have to be a certain way to be liked. to please people, to get in with the group or whatever. So one of the things that shows up for me is a kind of icky feeling in my stomach when I know that I'm not really being myself. Like if somebody said something that I really don't agree with, but I haven't spoken up about it. I come back to, I've spoken about this in previous episodes, but really checking in with my body about how I'm feeling about certain things. I just think resentment is such a key emotion when it comes to boundary issues, that when you start feeling resentful or irritated, that is a really good sign that that boundaries need looking at again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree.
And not letting it fester. So I think that's when you get into the martyr bit that we were talking about before, is when you ignore that resentment and it festers and festers, and then it kind of bursts out in a moment of irritation, rather than being able to calmly say, I know I said yes to this, but actually it doesn't work for me, or it was working for me, but now it's not.
Yeah.
So might be an uncomfortable conversation, but not a harmful conversation, a harmful outburst.
So, just as we're coming to an end, how do we start to say no? And probably be good to expand upon this more in another episode. But how do we start to say no and put some of those boundaries in place?
Good question. I don't actually think it's the saying no that's the problem. I think it's the guilt that comes up that is the problem. So I think the no can be difficult in that it's a change, it's a different behavior, and therefore it's going to feel uncomfortable, or just different. Any changes, can be difficult. But I think it's the guilt that makes it so difficult for people. And I really love the way that Gabor Mate speaks about this. And I wish I'd looked at the quote before we started. But essentially what he was talking about is inviting guilt to the party, like celebrating guilt. So I think of guilt as the emotion that tells you that you've done something wrong. So the reason that it comes up when we try and set boundaries is because you have been given or given messages or come to the conclusion that certain ways of behaving are right and certain ways of behaving are wrong. So with people pleasing, it's you should put everybody else's needs before your own. So when you start to change that rule, the guilt is going to come up to tell you that you're breaking the rule. Only this time it's for good reason. So we need to celebrate the guilt because it means that we're breaking the rule that needs to be broken. So that's the way I think about it. So it doesn't make it any less uncomfortable, really, but I think it just helps you kind of tolerate it and stay with the decision that you've made, even when it does feel really uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I think the reason it feels so uncomfortable is because, like you said, we feel like we're doing something wrong. And then it's the meaning that we put on that wrong feeling. And the meaning is usually, I'm being a bad person.
Yeah.
I'm not being a kind person. I'm not being helpful. I'm letting this person down. I'm disappointing this person. So, guilt in and of itself is the feeling. But where the suffering comes in is then the meaning that you are then attaching to that feeling. The guilt on its own isn't really saying anything. That's the feeling. The meaning you're attaching to it is then the part that makes it personal and painful. So then you're going to relent and you're not going to do it. But you're so right, because I always say to clients, when you start to say no, you can't get rid of the guilt so that you can then start saying no. It's you're going to say no and you're going to feel guilty.
Yeah.
And as you say, it's then sitting with that guilt and trying to challenge what meaning you would typically apply to that. And I love what you just said about actually changing the meaning to celebrating it.
Yeah.
That's a really good idea, that instead of this must mean I'm bad, it's, oh, this must mean I'm putting myself first. And that could be a good thing.
Yeah.
And in time, the guilt will lessen.
Yeah. The guilt means I'm changing the pattern. The guilt's coming up because I'm changing the pattern. That's why it's happening, not because I'm bad. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be great to talk about this more sometime and maybe give a few more practical tips about where to start. But I feel like we're probably going to have to conclude.
Yeah. Yeah.
Being too nice isn't about kindness, it's about fear. but you deserve more than surviving.
Your no makes space for your true yes. And that's how you build an authentic life.
This week, we invite you to look out for an opportunity to try one tiny no and notice how it feels.
Next time, we're talking about being too good at pretending to be fine, the masks we wear to look okay, even when we're anything but.
It's the masking episode, especially for our listeners who've spent years performing fine just to fit in. We'll dig into why we learn to hide, what it costs us to keep the masks on, and how to start letting the real you be seen without feeling like you're too much.
So if you've ever been called strong while you were secretly crumbling, or you've perfected the art of looking okay when you're exhausted inside, this one's for you.